Good morning, everyone. So I'm actually meeting you in my bedroom and in my bed because I thought this is where we can start. I mean, that's where Dinacharya, daily routine, begins. And please bear with me because doing these lives is something very new for me. And I really look forward to us sharing our times in the morning together during hearing that a lot of you are currently in self-isolation or in your own choiceful retreat. And so in many ways, although this is what the Canadian government is requesting, especially for all of us who have traveled, but I would say worldwide, there's this request that we stay at home. For me, it was actually in many ways a welcome invitation. And I know some of you might be feeling like you're a bit confined or there might be fear during this time, but actually I'm hoping that together we can really allow this to be a time that's welcomed for each one of us, a welcomed respite. I'm hearing beautiful stories of the way in which families are coming together, the way in which individuals are finally having a pause after racing and working and our orientation and our priorities being on things that maybe we never questioned before. So having this time of quietude, I'm hopeful that for us collectively even, as a human family, as a global family, can be a time that we really welcome a reset, a refresh, to come to life a little bit anew. And there's something so deeply nourishing about cocooning ourselves. Of course, we do this out of care so that this virus doesn't spread further and so that our governments and our countries can bring it under control. But more than that, I would welcome this as a collective stopping, a collective pausing. Good morning, everyone. I'm seeing various people hopping on. Good morning. So happy to see you. And I hope that over the days, more of us will choose to come together in this way. So as I was saying, I'm meeting you here this morning. It's morning, 7 a.m. here in Canada, in my bedroom and my bed. And that's where we're going to begin with our Dinacharya, our daily routine practice, because that's kind of how it begins. As you can see, my bed is on the floor, actually. So a lot of people, when they come over to my flat, they're surprised to see the bed on the floor. And it's quite a very small mattress. And I find that this, staying closer to the ground, to the earth, and sleeping on something that's fairly flat provides, I would say, the most sort of natural way of the body finding its own comfort and orientation, not using too much. We use all sorts of mattresses with pillow tops and things. And as we know, in many cultures, people would just sleep on a thin mat. Not saying that you necessarily have to do that. But also, sleeping closer to the floor, for me, is a very powerful practice of really pacifying and grounding my vata, especially after having been traveling these last couple months, and then it took a few days to arrive back here. And just in the current waves of what's been happening, it feels really grounding, really earthing to sleep, even though I'm in an apartment building, to sleep so close to the floor, at least. Welcome. I'm seeing lots of you hopping on, so I'm really happy to see you this morning. Good morning. Yeah, seeing some of you from the UK, some from India, seeing some from the East Coast of Canada. Good morning, Caroline. So beautiful to see your names and your tiny, tiny pictures, your faces. So yeah, let me know where you're from. I would love to know where we're coming together from, and in many ways this is allowing us to come together as Sangha, as community. So Dinacharya is what I've outlined, that in the mornings from 7 to 7:30, but really it may not always go till 7:30. We'll take a little pause, then we'll get ready for some yoga sadhana, for hatha yoga. But during this time, I wanted to introduce various practices of Dinacharya, or rather, let's call them various awarenesses. So Dinacharya in the Ayurvedic tradition is Dina and Charya, which means day, Dina, day, and Charya, which means a regimen or a constancy or a routine. So we can say Dinacharya is our daily routine. Welcome, yeah, seeing some from Pondicherry, from the Netherlands. So beautiful. Really beautiful to see people from around the world coming together. Oh, I'm feeling really touched actually in this moment that we come together in this powerful way. So Dinacharya, daily routine. Sometimes what happens is that when we hear this word, or even when it's shared, we orient towards the practices, just like in yoga. Excuse me, a little leftover from flying in my throat. So we orient towards what we need to do, the doership, I would say, rather than the awareness of what it's inviting us to be present to. And so similarly, a lot of yoga, when it's shared today, Hatha yoga, we orient towards the doership of what do I need to do, how do I need to act, where does the effort need to go? And the practice just becomes an accumulation of exactly that, practicing to be ourselves, which is a very ironic term that we use for yoga, rather than simply a celebration of coming onto our mat, into our beings, into our bodies, and exploring what it is simply to be alive. And instead, we start to become so honed in on the things to be done, on the technology. And I see this in Ayurveda as well, that we start to learn some new practices. So we start to learn things we can do in the bathroom, hygiene things, self-ritual things, this whole new fad term of self-care. But we're not really aware of why we're doing them. So we're just kind of going through the motions. We've been told that they're probably great things to be done, but we're not really oriented to the awareness, the presence that they elucidate in our being. And so Dinacharya, which is where we're starting this morning, and every day I'll introduce various things to you. Really what it is it's an invitation to recognize the preciousness of each day. I mean, that's truly what it is. And Vagbhata, the great rishi, the great master yogi, Ayurvedic doctor, who really clearly outlined Dinacharya in the Ashtanga Hridayam. And I would really invite you, a lot of the words might sound like a lot of Sanskrit and it might distance you a little bit, but actually you can look up the Ashtanga Hridayam and it's quite a practical text and quite easy actually to orient around. So I would welcome you to find a copy of the Ashtanga Hridayam, even a PDF online, and to look at the second chapter, which is the chapter about Dinacharya. And so Dinacharya, in this chapter, and generally in Ayurveda, he really welcomes us to recognize the gift of every single day. And this routine that we start to come into, or this regimen that we start to come into, what it is it's really more than anything, it's an honoring of what it is to be alive, and it's an opening to the day ahead of us. I would say so many of us, as I was mentioning before, we may have been in our obligatory lives for so long that we've been racing. We've been racing through our mornings, racing through our days, racing through things in autopilot without ever a moment of pause to really question or inquire why we're doing certain things, why we're orienting in certain ways. And we might in many ways, as we're having this time of isolation and of quiet collectively, we might start to actually see, wow, I've really been moving in conditioned ways for so many years of my life, since the time really that I was born and nurtured into these patterns. I still live abiding to them, even though I can see that they're not necessarily serving me. And so Dinacharya, what it starts to do is it really brings us into freshness with the gift of every day. Sometimes our racing has also led to us not even having an appreciation for waking up another day. So many of us may actually, in a subtle way, in a covert, feel entitled to our days. Let's say it in that way. Of course I'm going to wake up. Of course I'm going to have another day with my family. Of course I'm going to have another day at work. We might take each day just as something that we're truly entitled to. And that sort of energy or consciousness of entitlement, it really affects how we live out our days. Because if we just assume that we're going to wake up every day, and we just assume that we're going to have our family around us, or that we're going to have the same environment and the same people in our lives, or that we're going to have our own life without question, and just so everyone knows, I had a test before I left India, and I had a sinus infection actually from all the dust and the pollution, even though I was doing all my daily practices. It's moving out quickly, but the air conditioning on the plane. So no one worry, I'm over here in isolation, but I had a very clear test that showed that I don't have COVID. So what I wanted to say about this is, as we start to kind of come into this malaise of, just assumption, let's call it assumption, that I'll be alive for another day, I'll be given, the same accordances of life every day, our lives become a little bit flat, to be honest, a little bit stagnant. And we really start to just roll into this conditioned pattern way of living. We start to live as minds in many ways rather than as presence, as awareness. So we start to just live out our patterned conditioning. I wake up, I grab my phone, and then of course today everybody's grabbing their phone so we can be together in this way, but what a powerful way for you to use your phone. So many of us wake up, we use the phone as the alarm clock, we wake up and we start scrolling through Facebook or wherever, Instagram, or we start text messaging or checking our emails right away. And immediately we're brought into the racing of the mind. Or we just wake up and we jump out of bed and we race towards the next thing to be done. So we race to getting ready and towards work, orienting towards our lives out there rather than in here. So few of us have been taught, or let's say untaught. We've learned so many things. And I don't just mean from our parents, just collectively. We've learned so many behaviors that really distance us from ourselves, from the abode of ourselves, that really eclipse the beauty of just waking up in simple restfulness. If you remember as a child what it was like to wake up, there was probably much more sense of excitement and freshness and aliveness to the day when we were waking up. Sometimes that was because of the thing that was going to happen in the day, but sometimes it was just this pure joy of arising and of awakening. And somehow that can start to get lost as the filter of the mind becomes thicker and thicker. I almost think of it as a callus, as the mind becomes more and more of a callus over the gift of just being as we are in a new day. And so Dinacharya, the first thing that it really is, before it's any practice or anything to be done, we will do some things together, but the first thing that it is a consciousness of presence and a consciousness of really in many ways gratitude and recognition of what it is to be alive. What is it to awaken alive? To really awaken and arise, but be alive, totally, be there in life, alive. Rather than waking up, the body seems to wake up, the mind wakes up, and really we stay in the dream state in many ways. We're not present to the life within or present to the gift of this day. Yeah, and some of you are saying, waking up and rushing to our child, and it's a beautiful moment, of course, to wake up and to see our children or to be with our loved ones, but what would it be to just slow everything down a little bit more? To just really give a moment of pause when we wake up. And that's where Dinacharya begins, and Bhagavata really outlines this. And so actually the first thing that is outlined in the offering of Dinacharya is the waking up at this time. So now we're a little bit past that time, but the waking up at what's called Brahma Muhurta. So a Muhurta, don't get intimidated by the Sanskrit. I'm going to explain everything. So a Muhurta is a time period, like an hour. But in the Vedic tradition, this time period, a Muhurta time period, is 48 minutes rather than 60 minutes. There's all sorts of numerology to that, which we'll get into at another time. So Brahma Muhurta means the time of Brahma, of creation, the time of creation. Brahma is the god of creation, of the creative force. And so Brahma Muhurta is actually 48 minutes times 2. I know it's early, but maybe we can do our collective math. So that's in 136 minutes, right? Or rather 96 minutes, 96 minutes. And that's an hour and 36 minutes. So basically Brahma Muhurta is an hour and a half. And when is that time of creation? Well, it's said very clearly in the Vedic tradition that time of creation is the hour and a half before sunrise. That Brahma Muhurta, the time of creation, of arising into life, as life is coming into its creative force, as it's waking up, is that hour and a half before the sunrise. And it's highly suggested, not just in Ayurveda, but in all of the Vedic tradition, that we wake up during that time, that we wake up this hour and a half before sunrise, and that there's something very, very important to that time. And many of you can feel it, right? And maybe you can feel it more during these days because you have time, you have space. I mean, we always have time, but again, it's those mental afflictions that lead us to believe that we need to race through life, rush through life. And so beginning here is one of the most powerful things we can do for our lives and our days. To wake up somewhere an hour and a half before the sun is going to rise. And there's something very specific about the energy at that time. This is said to be the time that is more predominant of a Vata energy, a Vata dosha, which Vata energy is the energy of air and of ether, so air and space, which means it's light. There's a lightness to it, an uplifted kind of quality to it. It's creative and enthusiastic. It's open and vast and spacious. And so waking up during this time means you're waking up with creation. So as all of life is coming into form and really coming to wake up, there's something very powerful about waking up in the rhythm of that with all of life. And then at the same time, waking up in that energy of this lightness, of this kind of creativity, of this vast spaciousness is a very powerful energy, especially for us to ourselves be able to rest in spaciousness. You see, the energetics help to support the consciousness of how we are in any given moment. And so according to Ayurveda, waking up then, rather than waking up after sunrise and a little bit later, is going to have a very different effect on how we move into our day. On the contrary, the time from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. So just to be clear, from 2 until 6 is this more Vata time, and usually Brahma Muhurta falls within that, right? So for example, this morning here, it was around 6:45 that the sun was starting, 6:45, 7 that the sun was starting to really rise. So an hour and a half pulled back. Before that, it's around 5:30. So between 2 to 6 is this time of more Vata energy, that lighter time. But at 6 until 10, we actually have what is called the Kapha energy. And so Kapha is the more earth and water energetics. And so that contributes to groundedness, to a lot of vitality for our day. But if we sleep into that time, what happens? We tend to feel really heavy. We tend in many ways to feel a bit bogged down. And we tend to feel very connected to the physical, the more physical world, which means in many ways we'll be connected more to our instincts. These are all powerful things. But if we sleep into that time, we can feel all those energies when we're waking up, that we're really heavy, that we might feel a little bit unmotivated for the day, and also that we wake up a little bit more instinctually. So we're just more focused on the bodily needs. We're more focused even on the conditioned needs, like go to work, make money, go to the toilet, get some breakfast. Everything is a little bit more grounded, which is a powerful energy, but it's really promoted that we wake up more in that spaciousness of the day. That's again, waking up in wakefulness. There's a waking up in the great expansiveness. Let's say it in that way. And so just this is what I wanted to welcome us to this morning. So I already woke up previously, a couple hours ago, but I wanted to meet you here. It feels a little bit scandalous to meet everyone in my bed, just joking. It's such a beautiful space for me, actually, especially all these years having learned the gift, and I mean really experientially learned the gift of waking up, lying in presence as I begin to wake, and just simply allowing there to be the sense of wakefulness, to just rest in the gentle arising of all of the bodily senses as they wake up, to feel what it is to be alive. And as I was mentioning, some of you are hopping on now, but I was mentioning I really enjoy sleeping on the floor. So there's something very powerful about sleeping connected and close to the earth. And this would be my first invitation for today, would be that in the coming days, if you need to set your alarm, do so, but it will start to shift for all of us. You're going to see that in the routine of staying indoors, of all of us being cocooned and staying home during this time, naturally our system is going to find rhythm. Naturally, our systems are going to be really welcome to finding their own routine. You see, Ayurveda and the Vedic tradition really just, when it outlines things, when it codifies things, what it's really doing is it's writing down what already is, what's already the natural state of beingness. It's reminding us. So really it's all reminders. Much of this in the past was shared from teacher to student. So it was shared, or student to student. It was shared within Sangha, within spiritual community. But today we have these things codified and written. But they're not really new things for us. It's already so natural that something in our system wants to wake up during this time, that we really enjoy it and feel the presence of that lightness, the freshness, hearing the birds awaken, feeling the power of the sun. And there's so much more I could speak to there, because actually it's very clearly outlined in the Vedic tradition that there's something powerful during that Brahma Muhurta, during that time, an hour and a half before sunrise, that as the sun rises, and I'm pointing this way because this is where the window is, and actually where the sun is coming this morning here in Canada, that the sun actually gives a boon. So Surya, which Surya means sun, but also Surya means is a specific deva, a specific god. So Surya is given the energy of being its own, we could say entity, its own power, its own consciousness. That at this time of sunrise, Surya rushes in and offers a gift of prana. So there's something that naturally in us wants to meet the day, wants to meet that gift of energy, wants to meet that gift of prana. And so this is going to be the first invitation for today. We only have a couple more minutes in our little segment this morning about Dinacharya, but my welcoming for each of you, my invitation for each of you would truly be this, that we wake up with the freshness, the quietude of this time, about an hour and a half before sunrise, that you take a moment to lie in presence, to feel the sense of waking up, to maybe feel and sense through the five senses. What does this moment taste, smell, sound, feel, and look like? So often, we'll talk about this more throughout our time together in these days, but so often we primarily orient through the eyes. But what if we were to really receive life in all of her five offerings, all of the five senses, and all of the five elements, actually, because the five senses correspond to the five elements. And then waking up and feeling the presence as we wake up during that time and we start to move into our daily rituals, or we just sit, we just abide and sit, feeling the gift of the energy of the sun as it enters onto our area on the earth and into our hearts and into our lives, and as it inspires us to really be present into our day. So this is where we begin this morning, and there's so much more I will share even about this small invitation to wakefulness tomorrow. But now let's take a couple minutes of break for those of you who are going to join in this morning's yoga sadhana. Excuse me. So we'll take 5 minutes and we'll meet at 7:35 for a time of Hatha Yoga. And I will learn to move and set up this camera elsewhere in my flat so we can be together in that way. So beautiful to awaken together this morning. And I really hope that for each of us, we start to take this time as an invitation to retreat and to pause, and really in many ways to reset and refresh our lives individually, but also our lives collectively. Okay, namaste everyone. See you in a few minutes.